Good morning. It's winter again. Yesterday was looking like it could be Christmas coming up. It's pretty. Today is like getting to be annoying. So, speaking of annoying, I want to work with some poses today that we don't typically do because I find that our lifestyle is not really conducive to us sitting on the floor. Some will be able to, and some, I'm going to say, you'll be able to sit on the floor. Most people will, but whether you can sit well or not is the question. And so I want to do some warm up and some standing poses, and then I want to come down to the floor and do some seated things and just see, how we can do it. But there's a few rules, and this is kind of like rules for life. And I'm going to try to remember what the rules that I wrote down. I got 4 of them. So number 1 is let go of what you think you're supposed to be doing or where you think you should be in any given pose that we do seated. And listen to what the purpose of it is, where I'm trying to focus for the pose. Use props to meet yourself where you're at. Because if you don't, it's usually your ego that doesn't think you need them, and your ego has no clue what you need. And then 3rd is dig deep and find patience, because you're going to probably want to be somewhere that you're not. I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility. And number 4 is to make sure you're breathing. And that is a recipe for life, right? All those things. So we're going to practice how we live. And hopefully we get through it and we get some good benefits from some of these seated poses that we don't typically do. So Dean's scared. So I want to ask a question first, just so I can, feel good that what I've been saying over the weeks and months and years to all of you has kind of sunk in. What is the difference, and anyone can unmute and answer, what is the difference between an extended spine or neutral spine and a flexed spine? Anyone? Anyone at all? Come on. Come on, you know this. Okay, let me just ask you this then. Am I sitting with an extended spine or a flexed spine?
Extended.
Extended, yes. So an extended or neutral spine. See, this is good information for me to know is what I'm saying makes sense or doesn't make sense. When you are sitting with a spine or laying down or standing with a spine that has all its curves, it's considered an extended spine, or today I'm going to say neutral. When I sit like, I'll show you. I sit like what happens in a chair, or maybe I'll take this off so you can see better. When you sit in your car seat or your comfy chair, what typically happens? Now am I sitting with an extended spine or a flexed spine?
Flexed.
Yeah, yeah. You had a 50-50 chance. Okay, so I want you to know the difference between the two. This is neutral. This is flexed. So when we do table pose, when we start, we're neutral, and then we could go into cat pose, or even, I'm going to say this is for today's purposes, when we do a back bend, an arching movement, it's going to be a hyperextension. Okay, so I wanted those kind of standard terms to make sure we're on the same page. Okay, so now you can lay back with an extended spine. You didn't think you were going to have to answer things today, did you?
No, it's gonna be a test.
Well, I'm not marking you. Well, secretly I am. I'm not judging you though. Maybe secretly I am. No. It's really a reflection on me. Am I able to explain what I need to explain? And when you come lay down like this, you see how your spine lines up along the ground? Well, that was a slurp. This is a neutral spine. So let's think in terms of neutral, where you are resting on the back of your pelvis. You are not heavy in your low back, because when you're heavy in your low back, you start to create flexion or rounding in your low back. So you're not heavy in your low back, you're centered on the back of your pelvis. And then somewhere in your mid to upper back, you're resting, probably around where your shoulder blades are. And then your shoulders are either rolling away from the floor or they're dropping towards the floor, depending on what's going on in your chest. And then you're balancing on the back of your head and your feet as well. So let's just take a few moments to just tune into that alignment. I'm going to request that you have your legs bent just so we can soften through the hip flexors, and it'll give you more of a chance to be more neutral through your spine. When we come to the floor, we think, like when we're standing, that our spines are vertical, and they're not always that way. So bring your hands to the front of your hip joints to check out to see if your hip flexors are softening, and walk your feet away if they're not. If you're not sure, lift one leg, feel what happens underneath your hand, lift the other leg, feel what happens there. Those are your hip flexors. Those are the ones that flex, that bring your legs towards your body or your body towards your legs, depending on gravity. So flexion is when you shorten the distance between two bones, and extension is when you open up the space. So I want you to think in terms of looking at the front of the spine, and when your spine is flexed, you're shortening the front of the spine. When you're extending it, you're lengthening it, hyperextending it, you're lengthening more through the front of the body and shortening through the back. So let's just have your hands here resting on the front of your pelvis, keeping your hip flexors soft, but slowly let your pelvis rock forward and back. I don't want to stay here too long, but I want you to just get a sense of where you're at right now. So this is how we'll know whether we need props. We do your own detective work and see. So I'm rolling back and letting my low back move into the floor. So I'm creating flexion. Pretty much flexion in my whole spine except for my neck, and then the other way, and we're creating hyperextension, I'm going to say, or gets a little confusing, but I'm going to call it hyperextension today because it's beyond extension. Like if we're to have hyperextended elbows or knees, it's beyond the normal range of extension. So just tilting my full pelvis backwards and forwards, and just kind of getting a sense of where the movement's coming from. I can feel my head moving, so I've got movement that goes through my whole body. And this is really important. This movement of the pelvis is what's needed when we start doing anything seated. You need to know, especially the forward bends. Okay, then come back into the middle, and similar to how you did it, your legs stayed still, and you moved your pelvis around your thigh bones and let your low back move. Let your pelvis rock from side to side without letting your legs move. So similar to the forward and back, but now it's side to side. And what range of motion do you have here? And it's, moving your legs like windshield wipers is easy, but keeping your legs still and letting your pelvis rock around the femurs, that's more challenging. So this is not considered as part of the seated floor poses because you're laying down. Laying down poses are accessible to everybody. I'm just kind of doing this rock the boat, rock the pelvis. I still want to be aware of whether my low back is pressing into the floor, or whether I'm shortening one side of my body to get this action to happen. Is it easier on one side or the other? This little rotation that's happening. Okay, and then come back into the middle, nice and warmed up through the.
It's kind of like wagging your tail on the floor.
Wagging your tail, good question. Wagging your tail would be more like this, where you're shortening one side of the body. So let's do that. So I'd like you to now I'm going to say hike one hip up towards your armpit and then change sides. So one side of the body gets longer. The other one was really just left and right. And now this is lifting side to side. So now I feel like I'm wagging my tail. Does that feel different for you, Al?
Yes. It's more of a
Lateral.
movement.
Yes, it's called a lateral flexion because you're shortening the distance on the sides of your vertebra. Okay, then come back into the middle. Good question. Then walk your feet in a little bit closer so you have some leverage to now roll back into your low back. So again, same as what we did, but now keep rolling, making contact with your spine as you start to lift your pelvis off the floor, then your low back, kind of one vertebra at a time into bridge pose, and then roll back down. So we're rolling through flexion. And then at the bottom, you come back into extension again, or neutral spine. And then we roll up again. There might just be a test at the end, Brad. So you know I'm going to ask you again the difference. So you can't just zone out in this class today. Not specifically you, Brad, anybody. So you're rolling through. When you come up into the top of the movement, you're more in extension again, except for what's happening in your neck. And then when you roll down, you're rolling through the spine, through the back of the body, and being aware of what moves with ease and what doesn't move with ease. And then we'll do one more roll down, one more. And a little hip movement. Okay, so now just let your legs go side to side. Actually, no, I'm going to change that up. Widen your feet a little bit and let your knees drop towards each other and then away from each other. So again, we're going to keep the pelvis still, just warming up through the hip joints. Keeping the spine in a neutral alignment means you have more movement available to you. We have more movement through the hip sockets, typically. Not to say that you can't move out into flexion with your spine and have movement, but there's more available to you. And breathing comes with ease, as opposed to could be challenging, or you wanting to hold your breath. So now we are moving the thigh bones from side to side in the hip socket. We're adding a little bit of a rotation to the legs as well. That'll be our final movement, is a rotation. This is the beginning of a rotation. So the pelvis stays quiet. And then back into the center. Walk your feet back towards the center. So, hip distance apart. Lift your left or right leg up, doesn't matter which one it is, so that you have, I'm going to say, start with a 90-degree angle of your thigh and then just bring it slightly forward of that. Then start to rotate your hip joint. So you turn your foot in and then turn it out. Going to be harder to go out because it's an internal rotation with hip flexion, harder. I'm just kind of turning it. I want to keep my pelvis still. I want to just pay attention to the range of motion that I have while I'm keeping my spine in neutral. So still with my leg lifted, I don't want to be pressing my low back heavily into the floor. Yeah, you got it. You got it. Notice if you're trying to do the movement from your foot. Like if I turn my foot, then maybe I'm doing it. Okay, last one. We've got gravity dropping the thigh bone into the socket too. And then bring your leg back down, other side, lift up. So you start with a vertical thigh, and then we come slightly forward so we can let that hip flexor soften again. When it's vertical or beyond, it's going to be working to try to hold your leg in place. We want it to soften. And then we go into rotation. And notice maybe the range of motion isn't as great on this side. So everyone understand what the range of motion is, your range of motion? That's a question. How would anyone describe that? Something, well, hopefully you're not going to go to that point where something breaks, but how far your joint can move in the directions that it's meant to move in is your personal range of motion. There's a suggested range of motion that comes with the body, and then there's your range of motion. So in this position, pardon? No, there is no manual. There should be. Wouldn't that be great if we got a manual how this body works? We have to figure it out as we go. No instructions came with us. And then bring your legs down. Stretch out, legs move away from arms. It kind of does change daily. It's like your kids don't come with a manual either. You gotta figure that out. And they keep changing the rules. That's when you think you figured that out. Okay, now let's get up. So roll over to one side. And let's create another opportunity for awareness of the spine and the pelvis. So come to all fours or table pose and find neutral or your extended spine here. Relatively easy to find. We've just really taken the body that was this way and flipped it this way. So now instead of the back of your body facing down, you've got the front of the body facing down. These are the two easy ones. I'm starting with the easy ones. And then let's try to have the same kind of movement. We'll start with pelvis. So the same rocking of your pelvis. See if you can find that here, just your pelvis. So you're dropping your tailbone down towards your heels, and then you're lifting your tailbone away from the floor. Notice it's probably affecting your low back. Your low back probably goes into flexion when you drop your tailbone down, and it goes into, I'm going to say, hyperextension, so beyond neutral, when you lift your tail up. Okay, so now let's take what we did in the bridge pose on the floor and add on. So now drop your tailbone down, start to round through your low back. I like to push into my hands and shift my body a little further back to get into my mid back, my upper back, and then drop my head. So this is flexion of the spine right now. Start at your tailbone again and start lifting your tailbone up. We'll go through extension, neutral, and then you can go beyond. So find your range of motion into like more of a back bend. And then again, tailbone. So we're starting from the tail and moving towards the head. And your head will be the last thing to move. So notice the difference when you come through that neutral alignment. Notice where your shoulder blades are. Where are they in relationship to each other? You got them working here. The muscles around the shoulder blades are working and going in both directions. We'll do one more. And then I'm going to add in or change it to, let's do the wag the tail, since Al asked about that. So we're shortening one side of the body and lengthening the other, one from side to side. Think of it as creating space between your rib cage and your pelvis on one side and shortening it on the other. So we stay in a neutral spine in terms of the curves of the spine. We're just shifting our hips laterally. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, now I'm going to do something fun we haven't done for a while. Take your right leg and reach it back until your leg is straight, and you can tuck your toes under. We'll start with a calf stretch here. Press back through your heel. So you get a calf stretch and a stretching of the fascia and the sole of the foot. Whatever works for you, whatever it feels good. I want you to be in a place where that feels like a good stretch. Then come to your left fingertips. So I'm not putting a lot of weight on my fingertips, just enough. And my fingertips, I'm kind of pulling them towards each other to give me like a 5-pointed base. Not a tripod, but what would it be? Yeah. So then notice how balance might be more of a challenge already. You're going to take your right leg off the floor and your left arm off the floor. Doesn't have to be any great height. We're just balancing on left shin, and you can have your toes tucked if you want on the left, and right hand. So a little bit of core kicks in. Can you be aware of the shape of your spine here? We'll take 2 more breaths here and then change sides. So remember, breathing was important. That was on my list of rules. Good that you start right now, being aware of when you want to hold your breath. And then bring your hand back down, and let's change sides. It gets you to change your hands too. So left leg back, tuck your toes, come onto your right fingertips, on your right starfish. Get the calf stretch and the sole of your foot stretch first. And then decide, okay, how am I going to lift my right leg off the ground, my left leg off the ground and my right fingertips? How do I bring myself into balance? That doesn't have to be very high. And then we hold and see, what does that feel like? Where am I able to breathe? If my core muscles are holding me here, which are lower in the abdomen, then can I actually breathe into my rib cage? You know, if I've sunk my low back into my body, then I'm going to have a harder time breathing into the back ribs. So I need to have an awareness of keeping that full, but not going into flexion. So neutral in the spine here, as neutral as you can find. Okay, 1 more breath. And then bring your hand down. Okay, first side again, I'm going to add on, move these guys out of the way. So right leg, left fingertips. Find where you're going to find the balance coming from your core, and then lift. And you're going to bring your elbow and your knee towards each other. So I'm going to let you do the first few without any guidance. Just elbow and knee move towards each other. So I've said this before, towards is a direction, doesn't mean you have to get there. It's not a destination. So 1 more. And then we're going to change sides. Elbow and knee towards each other. I'm challenging my balance. I'm allowing my spine to go from extension into flexion as I bring my elbow and my knee towards each other. Would you agree with that? Are you flexing to do that? Flexing your spine? The answer is yes. 1 more. I'm going to change it in a second. Okay, bring your hand down, bring your leg down. Back to the first side. Now this, watch me for a second. This time, instead of meeting somewhere in the middle, I'm not going to let my leg, it's almost like there's an imaginary wall right here, and I can't let my leg go past where my leg that's supporting me is. So instead, I'm going to go from here and then wrap around to the outside. So what I'm creating is rotation in my spine, maintaining length in my spine. So again, not a destination, but a direction. So when you find you're starting to round your spine, flex it, you've gone too far. Yeah. So your leg cannot go past your other leg. All these rules today. Yeah. Right. Direction. You do not have to bring your elbow and knee together. The more important part is that you be aware that you're keeping your spine in extension, or at least trying to keep it there in neutral. One more. And then change sides. So this would be a lot of flexion. The idea is that I'm trying to rotate my spine while keeping balanced. The stakes are higher. I'm working around the shoulder joint too. Last one. And then bring your hand down. First downward dog. Actually, let's go back into a child's pose. Get you off your hands for a moment. Maybe have your fists here. I like the idea of stacking my fists because if I felt any pain or pressure in my wrists, that usually helps to clear it. Feel like I'm spreading the joint. If your ankles, knees, or hips feel awful here, then flip over onto your back and draw your legs towards your body. So now your spine is in flexion. Can you feel that your tailbone is dropping down? In most cases, everybody here anyway. Then you've got an even curve. This is a beautiful pose to feel a sense of even flexion through the spine that starts at the pelvis and moves towards your head. Notice in your own body if you feel you have more flexion in your upper back than your lower back. And can you find more of a balance between the two? 2 breaths. After the second breath, slowly come up. And I just want to show you here. So I'm going to try to exaggerate. See how my upper back is rounded and I'm more flat in here? So in open that out, I want to lift up and lengthen through the upper part of my spine and then round a little bit more through my lower spine. So now this is too low for my to be there. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Downward dog. As you move into downward dog, you're moving from 6 points of contact with the floor to 4. And guess what your spine wants in this pose? Does it want flexion or extension? Pardon? Okay, good catch there, Dee. He said your spine wants to flex, but it should be an extension. Yes, true. So if your spine is not in extension, bend your knees, widen your feet apart, and pull your hips back away from your hands. And see if you can get that. Bev, that was beautiful. Did you feel the difference? Your low back just lengthened. Okay, walk your feet towards your hands. I've always had teachers who say, how you are on your yoga mat is how you are in life. You're just living out how you are. Come on up into Tadasana. Let's find Tadasana. Now this is getting hard. Standing on 2 feet, like it's really crazy if you think about how little foundation we have and how we don't even think about it because we can survive. But the reality is your pelvis can be forward, it can be back, it can be one side or the other, it can be rotated, and your rib cage is going to not necessarily stack. Your body will make compensations just to keep you upright because that's what it does. You can thank it for that, but it's also doesn't always help you. So in Tadasana, we want to stand and get a sense of where these body parts are in relationship with each other. So can you get a sense by maybe taking your pelvis forward, maybe taking your pelvis back, and think of just shifting your pelvis forward in space and back in space, not necessarily locking your knees or not thinking from your knee perspective, but how would you get your pelvis forward and how would you get it back? And then see if you can find a place where you feel more balanced. So if I take my pelvis too far forward, I know I'm going to have creases right here. This is the gluteal fold. This is the gluteal muscles and these gluteal fold here. I'm exaggerating. And then if I go too far this way, then I might be going in hyperextension in my spine. So I want to find a place where I can find balance. I've moved my pelvis back and I want to lengthen my low back so the back of the pelvis goes long. So this becomes more challenging. And then where's your head in relationship to your feet? Can you make a line between your head and your feet? Like is your head in front of your feet? Where does your rib cage need to shift to help stack your head where it needs to stack? And find the same alignment that you had when you were lying on your back. Then I'm going to take that and say, okay, now we go into a forward bend. So your legs become the support, but now you put all this weight forward. So let's all do it by bending knees first. Ankles, knees, and hips bend. I want to keep my spine in extension as I come forward and then come back up again. So can you be aware of keeping your spine like downward dog, like Tadasana? And at what point do you think you'll start to go into flexion or hyperextension? Have your blocks in front of you. We're going to go into Uttanasana, or standing forward bend. It's not necessarily easy. If you can see a picture of yourself, look sideways as you're doing this to get a sense. So what it's not is this. Pelvis goes back like we did in downward dog. We come forward. And if you're still not able to get here without rounding, then go wider. Give yourself more space. And as you do this, widen your knees away from each other and find your blocks. Be an extension here. Long, long spine. Can you get a sense of the connection from your tailbone to your head? You guys are so good. What about your neck? What I'm seeing is a lot of hyperextension in the neck, a lot of lifting the head up, and more length is needed. Right. So now from extension, that's really fantastic. Start to let your pelvis roll forward. Your low back get longer and rounded, and mid back, upper back, and head. So allow your spine, or flexion, I should say. Yeah, and then come back, go into extension again. Feel the difference, and the movement is going to happen in your pelvis. So initiate that movement like we did with cat and cow with your tailbone first. So to go from flexion back into extension, it's your tailbone lifts, and it's like a ripple effect forward. And then from extension, tailbone, and extension. 2 more times like that. So it's like a cat-cow standing, right? Different relationship with gravity. What have I got for time? Boy, this class goes fast. Okay. Come back down into flexion. So you can actually, no, let's go into extension. Then pick up your right foot, step it to the back of the mat. Bring your right knee down. Position your blocks so that you can move back and forth. We'll just do this for a few moments. Again, I'm not trying to get anywhere. I want to be aware of when I go into extension in my spine, not hyperextend, or maybe hyperextension. I want to know what is my go-to, and is it possible as I move through these two movements to stay neutral through my spine? Not that I absolutely have to, but can I? Can I be aware of that? And then can I do the opposite? Can I go through flexion and extension? There's always going to be a go-to place in your body that will go into flexion before anywhere else. Last one. From the forward position, lift your back knee off the ground. Take a step in with your back foot and rotate your heel inward. Come on up. You're facing forward. This hip rolls inward. This thigh widens out to the side. Lift your arms up to whatever degree you're able to, whether it's here or all the way up parallel. And then instead of thinking of bending your front knee, think of lowering your sit bones right where they are. And you need to bend your knee to get that to happen until you start to feel an opening through the front of your right hip and thigh. That makes sense? Is your spine in extension or hyperextension? Your personal spine. It's more of a rhetorical question. So does it feel like Tadasana or does it feel more like a back bend? That's the deeper question. Okay, so can you start to bring your spine towards feeling like Tadasana? How do you make subtle adjustments? If I'm doing this, shortening here and lengthening here, I need to try to shorten here and lengthen here. It's not that I need to be in Tadasana in my spine, but I want to move in that direction. Okay, bring your hands down. Come back down. Let's just change sides. Right foot forward, right knee down. Adjust your blocks. So we'll go through moving through extension first, or staying in an extended spine, neutral. Axial extension is another way it's described in the anatomy world, because your axis is this way, your vertical axis. And we want to have the curves of the spine move around the vertical axis. It's not easy for us to be able to find that. We live in a world of conveniences and things that make us comfortable, which doesn't always serve us. It's marketable for sure. Okay, then try flexion. And be aware of whether you're getting flexion in your low back, how you're getting your flexion there, where you're getting it in your mid back. If we always move where we always have moved, we'll always have the same thing. If you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. We want to try to be aware of where we're not moving. Okay, last one. Then back knee off the ground, step in slightly. And slightly could mean, if you had a short stance, you might be stepping out. Heel turns inward. I'm going to say both feet are on their own side. So there was a dividing line down the center of your mat. You wouldn't clip your back heel and then come up. I'm facing forward and I want to put my awareness in my two sit bones. In this position, I want my pelvis to feel level. I don't want it to be overly tipped forward. So if I kind of bring it back into this neutral alignment, have an awareness here, then drop my sit bones towards the floor, I'm more likely to stay more balanced in the middle than to be leaning forward. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then you can take your arms out and up wherever you need them to be. There is value if you can bring your arms to a place of straight and not shrug your shoulders. There's value there. Well, I shouldn't say that. There'll be a little bit of lifting, elevation of the upper trapezius. So it's up to you. This is where you can explore. And are you breathing? You know, that was rule number 4. Okay, and then bring your hands down. Move your blocks out of the way, step forward. Come on up, let's find Tadasana again. I think for time's sake, I'm gonna have us move into, okay. I think I'll have us move into a side angle pose and triangle. So have your blocks, we're gonna go sideways on the mat. So if I'm facing this way, I've got my blocks behind me. And I'm gonna step out. So from the center, I've stepped out, you know, again, depends on your length of legs. I'm gonna say a comfortable step, and then whatever that distance is, you're gonna do the same on the other side. So I can't give you a specific amount because it depends on the length of your legs. I'm short, this is my stance. If your legs are longer than mine, you're probably gonna go wider. You have the potential to go wider. So now take your left leg. Someone's gonna be backwards no matter which way I do it in here. So if you wanna change up, if you want to do the opposite of what I'm saying, that's okay. For the first side, that's okay. Just reverse the left and rights. So whatever your front leg is going to be, you can decide. Pick up the front of your foot and start to rotate. So at the beginning, we were rotating the thigh bone in the hip socket. That's what we're doing here. We're starting with a rotation of the leg first. Then we're going to rotate the pelvis away from the back legs. Then we have this happening. Yeah, you're pivoting on your heel. You're going to keep rotating the leg and the pelvis until your leg faces towards the front of the mat. Now, land your foot down. Keep a sense of rotating your front leg towards the side. Think of turning your kneecap out. And then start to bend your front knee. Again, similar as before. Sit bones down. Bend your front knee, leaning your kneecap towards the outside. Lean forward. And again, now, if you have a short torso, you're probably good. If you have a longer torso than your thigh, this is going to be a potential challenge for you. So you can bring your hand to a block. It's lower, but you might need it to go longer than the length of your thigh. I'm also going to wiggle my back foot further back so that I can find more of a long line through this top side of the body. This arm can come up again wherever it wants to be, similar to the options you had in Warrior One. This is side angle. Yeah. Breathe. Notice if you don't feel centered, if you feel everything's falling forward, do something with this back leg to feel more anchored. Okay, so now take your top arm, whatever one it is, reach it up and back and push your feet down into the floor and away from each other to come up, and we'll find Warrior Two. So Warrior Two, we've really, everything in the leg stays the same. We've leveled the pelvis out, brought the pelvis into the middle. Okay. Now straighten your front leg, wiggle your back foot in slightly. Keep your front leg straight now. Rotate your leg so kneecap goes towards the outside and slide down. Now I said it starts off straight, but it might bend. You might need it to bend somewhere here. Hand to the block, hand to 2 blocks, hand to your leg. Triangle pose. Spine is long. So your spine is an extension in all of these poses. And then we add rotation. Rotation happens in the thoracic spine where the rib cage is. Maybe your arm goes up. Can you get a sense that your spine is long? Because that's what the spine needs. Yeah. Are both sides of your body the same length? Because there's a tendency for the bottom side to be shortened. And your hip hikes up. Remember the wagging of the tail. Your hip will hike up towards your left armpit or your front armpit. Okay, push down into your feet. Bend your front knee if you need to. Come on up. Turn your feet back towards the front. Now you got a good distance. You might need to adjust it. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Rotate your other leg. Now you've been through it, so you don't need to see me. Rotate your front leg, which was your back leg. Now it's your new front leg. And then rotate your pelvis away from your back leg. Get a sense that that's what's happening. Do you need to adjust your back foot because you feel like you're twisting your back knee? Turn it forward more if that's the case. When you can land it facing it forward, bend your knee and aim your kneecap towards the outside. Come down. This is side angle pose. So you're either forearm on your thigh or hand to a block or blocks. You can do a block tower. Maybe wiggle your back foot back to give you length. Bottom side of the body needs to be just as long as the top side. Top arm comes wherever you want it to be. It's the same relationship as whatever you had in Warrior One. Is your spine neutral? Can you get that sense? So good. You guys are really getting it today. Okay, push down and away with both feet as you come up into Warrior Two. So your pelvis moves towards being level. Yeah. There is a rotation here in the spine. It's subtle. Press into your front foot to make your front leg move towards straight. You can adjust your back foot, maybe bring it in a little bit, depends on your stance. Maybe you want a wider stance. I'm a little teapot and you hinge at the front hip, keeping your nose and your sternum and your pubic bone in a line will be a clue to you that you're staying in extension and not lateral flexion, which is one side shortens. And then wherever you need to be, your range of motion in triangle. Yeah, that's great. Imagine that you are leaning into a wall, the whole back of your body. You're doing this pose while you're lying down on the floor. Where's the back of your body? Push down from your feet, push them away from each other, and up you come. Okay, turn your feet in and then heel toe back into the center. Okay, we're going down. And that's a good thing. Have your blocks, have your blankets, have everything you need. Your strap, you're going to need your strap probably. We're going to start with, okay, I want to give you options because it's an all levels class. There are some that might be able to sit on a blanket. Let's start, have a folded blanket like this and just put it to the side. So the pose that we check to see what we need in terms of props, remember the ego doesn't know what you need. I'm gonna have those nearby just in case. The pose that we check in with is a pose called Dandasana. It's called staff pose. It's like you're a staff and it's sitting with your legs out in front. And if we have our hands behind like this, you can probably prop yourself up so you won't fall back. Everybody can kind of do this. Everybody can. But how you know whether you're doing it with really great alignment is what's going on in your pelvis. So if I was sitting with not so great alignment, my pelvis would be like this. You see? So the top of my pelvis rolls back. How I know it's doing that, probably my shoulders go forward. So I can kind of try to fix that. I can kind of go, well, if I lift my chest, then I'm straight. But I haven't addressed what's going on down here. So really, this is the place to start. Imagine that you've got hands right here pushing in and lifting this part of the body up. So it's not coming from your chest, it's right here. So if you have your hands fairly far back behind you, see where they need to be to get that to happen with ease. Once you have that, then see, can I walk my hands in? And is there a point where my pelvis goes from being in neutral like this back into this flexed state in my lumbar? And that's how you kind of know what you need to do, what angle you have. If you're able to sit in Dandasana with a 90-degree angle and your pelvis is shifted forward into this anterior position, then you might be okay. If you're able to keep your legs active and root your inner thighs, so inner thighs down. What's happening in your low back though, guys? Can you tell? Yeah, some rounding. So then I'm going to say, well, go up a notch. Pardon? Yeah. Then go up a notch. So I've got the folded blanket. And when I come onto the folded blanket, I want to walk forward and almost leave my sit bones up and start to encourage my pelvis to tip forward. So if you've already discovered you're okay in Dandasana without, then that's fine, stay there. So this is Dandasana. Maybe you still need this. One of the ways you can check too is in downward dog, how much do you need to bend your knees? So 2 ways for Dandasana, hands can come back behind you and you open up this angle. Your pelvis is neutral. It's not rolled back like this, it's now like this. So that's one way. The other way is like in downward dog, bend your knees. To bend your knees, yeah. And then do you need your hands? So I'm not pulling myself up with my hands. You can have your hands here, but now I have that lifted. So 2 ways, here, here. A third way is to now, again, depending on your body, this is just kind of setting the ground rules again. I'm going to sit on a block this time, and I'm going to have my blanket rolled up. So try this with me. You may need more than a block. So if I sit on a block, now that puts the angle of my body and my legs so different than what I had. Again, can I walk forward and kind of have my sit bones on the block as that's the point, the pivot point, the tipping point. Then the blanket is going to come under my knees, because if I don't, it's not like I need it, but I have a tendency personally, and most people will, to just drop the backs of the legs down. So now we support the knees and maybe just slightly below, just the top of the calf. You say, okay, how does Dandasana feel now? Do I need 2 blocks? Yeah, okay. So I want to have one leg straight. So go where you need to go. So we're going to go into, so now, Dean, you need 2 blankets probably under your knees. It's right behind you. Just reach back. Yeah. Okay, so now we've got the lift of the pelvis and the spine in neutral. Yeah. So now bend your right leg and bring your foot to the floor. When you bring your foot to the floor, notice I'm not bringing it way in here. It's possible, but when you bring it in, what happens here? So if I bring it to here, and I'm back where I started, right? So I want to have my foot where I can still maintain this lift. So this is a rotation now. Up you go, nice and tall. The right leg is bent. So now we start to rotate towards the right. And just do it without a lot of instruction. You can use your leg. Your hand on your leg is leverage. You can bring your right hand to your hip, maybe lean it back onto the floor, depending on where you are. So I still want to have my head and my spine in that neutral alignment. See why I don't teach these very often? They're not easy for our bodies. Okay, does it make sense? Does it feel good? Notice if you're starting to round and then lift up from the low back and rotate. This is called Marichyasana number 3. It's like Mambo number 3. You can turn your head, look over your shoulder, and then slowly come back from your head down, and then straighten both legs again. So as you straighten your legs, I'd like you to have this awareness that you are rolling this part of your thigh downward. The inner thighs roll downward and move away from each other. Bend your other leg, and it's possible if you're on the floor, it's even possible if you're using this setup that your foot can go here. It all depends on what's going on with your body. Play around with it and see, where can I get that? Then once you have your hand on your leg, you can use that as leverage wherever you happen to be. And I like to push down to lift up. So not only am I lifting up from here, I'm allowing the rest of my spine to lift as well. I'm not just tipping my rib cage back. Then start the turn from your belly button. See if you can rotate your belly button towards the left. And then the lower part of your ribs. Notice if you've already really cranked your head around. Bring your head back so it stays in line with your sternum. Then middle rib cage. Then shoulders. And then the last thing to turn is my head. I can totally lean back to give me more space to rotate so that I avoid this flexion as I'm rotating. Does all this stuff make sense? You know the difference between flexion and extension, or flexion and neutral. Breathe. Remember, that was a big part of it. Dandasana. Okay. Slowly come back, head first, then shoulders.
What's the difference between one blanket, one block, two blankets, two blocks?
Higher off the ground, greater angle of the body to the legs. So the higher you go, the more you're going to create greater than 90 degrees. The blanket is really just a cushion. Really go by what the block is rather than the blanket.
But isn't this?
He's higher off the ground than you.
No, I get that.
And he's got more of an angle.
Split the angle between your legs and your belly, or
Your torso,
so
if you
you're more like this, and he's got more.
Yeah, he's got more, his legs are more of an angle away from his vertical body. Okay, we'll come back. Yeah. Okay, so move that aside just for a moment. Come onto hands and knees, because there's more where that came from. Yay. Yeah. I will, as you come into table, you can start to move. I'm gonna draw something on the board. So Dandasana, so just move in table pose. Dandasana, ideally, it would be, I shouldn't even do it that way. Head, neck, upper back, lower back, pelvis. Dandasana. So what we're doing with Dean, one block would be, well, here. Two blocks would be, let's say, here. And this angle here is greater than 90, right? From here, we're going to here to here. Well, that's.
So the question is it a non-saucy or you put one block and the first 90?
Yeah, that's this one.
Yeah. You now move forward and put one blanket and then two blankets.
But
my question is, the two blankets equates to the two blocks.
No, they don't. They don't, because the blanket is only supporting the back of the knee. This is the height. This is the pivot point right here. This is the pelvis. So it's here that you create this space. You're only supporting the legs where they fall. That's what the blanket is for.
I'll challenge you.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. I love a good challenge. Yeah. Okay. So now from table, come back. Now, here's the next pose. Similar but different. So whatever you used, whatever you sat on before, you may not be in the same place. So this time I'm going to start with a block. I'll show you. Have your other stuff ready just in case. So from here, let's say we start with a block. So maybe come with me, sit on one block and let's see. We bent one leg, right? Wherever it happened to be, we bent that. You're going to take the other leg, close the knee, hold on to your ankle, and put your shin down. So how high do you need to be to get your shin to go down? It's the same thing though. Try a second block. Take your pelvis up higher and see if that drops down. Maybe this will solve your... Yeah, it's going, it's going, it's going. Okay, hey, okay, so now we take the long hamstrings out of the picture. You have a couple of choices. You can do the rotation similar to what you did, and you're rotating in the same direction, like so using your leg as leverage, but you can also shift this leg towards the middle. And I say can, these are possibilities. As soon as you start to feel you're distorting your spine, you're not going there. So you might need to go like one blanket height higher and then support underneath your knee. So up we go. Remember, the ego does not have a place. Props are what they are. It's just kind of good to kind of go, okay, this is what I need. So then we rotate. And wherever you happen to be, you're rotating from there. Is your low back moving in? Because that's the first place. We don't want to do a rotation if the low back is not moving in. I figured, I've been working with a lot of you for a long time. This is an all levels class. Some of you might not get this, and that's okay. And your bodies might not be able to feel it yet. But I want you to try to understand the concept, the principle here of there'll be more ease when that happens. So yeah, there you go. And you're not in pain. Are you in pain? Okay, rotate that way. Okay. Yeah, look at how tall your spine is. That's awesome. Okay, slowly unwind, come back. The other side might be completely different.
I don't know, Fred, it looks too easy.
It looks really easy. I wish you could see him. Okay, so now second side. So it's the Dandasana, right? Are you gonna go here? Maybe you're just gonna do the same pose again. But maybe you close the knee joint, you move from the hip joint. I'm rotating my hip joint and bringing this leg down. And if you're close, I'd like your shin to be down so that you're not breaking this line between your foot and your leg. So you could go like a half a blanket higher might be what you need. And then you can decide where you're gonna go. This is Ardha Matsyendrasana. And just in case you're wondering, this is considered a forward bend because of the relationship between your legs and your body. Tadasana is extension or is neutral. But anytime you bring your legs and your body closer, you close that angle, it becomes a forward bend. So I just want to be kind of clear on that. This is a forward bend with a rotation, really. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So Al, low back in. Yeah, there you go. There you go. And then slowly make your way back, head first. Yep. And then take your legs out. Let's come back into table again, because I'd like to come back where you're reminding yourself of neutral, and you can do any movement. The last one is going to be Upavishta Konasana, and it's the last one before we go into Shavasana. So that's like my little carrot dangling in front of you. You're almost done. Okay. Then Yeah, if you want to too, you can come forward, let your legs, your knees open up so they move from knee flexion into knee neutral. It gets a little complex too because flexion and extension are directions, but they're also shapes. Okay, so the last version, the last pose, Upavishta Konasana. I'm going to tell you, it is this pose. It's Dandasana with your legs out wide. So we want the same rules as Dandasana. I want this to move in and up when I'm in this position. So what do you need to build yourself up to be here? It's not, you can see my legs are not that much wider than my mat. They don't have to be extremely wide in this pose. I do want my inner thighs to be able to roll down, and maybe, so the first way to make that angle between my legs and my body greater than 90, if I need it, is to go back. And then I have this moving in. If I come here and this rolls back, I'm affecting the whole chain up through the spine. So this might be your Upavishta Konasana. My legs are active. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to take you through a couple variations here. My legs are active like I'm standing on my feet. Press out along the inner line of your legs and out through their big toe base. I'm going to pull back through the outer side as if you're trying to shorten the outer side of your legs. So where we happen to be, here or back here, or whatever you're sitting on. Okay, this is like the Dandasana of Upavishta, wide-legged forward bend. This is a wide-legged forward bend, and most likely you're feeling it somewhere. You're feeling hamstrings. There's work here. This is a strength. There's a strengthening component for sure, but you can make this bigger so that it's not so much work on your hip flexors. This is number one. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. Put your head right in line with your spine. Number two is the same pose wherever you happen to be, but we're going to bend the knees, pull your heels towards you until you feel you have got, you might be able to walk your hands in towards you. You feel you have got the space now for your pelvis to tip forward, or not tip forward, but to lift up from this position back here. You can hold on behind or underneath your knees. So the nice part about this is we've taken the hamstrings out of the picture. So it's possible to start to take the spine into flexion from the low back. What we don't want is the pelvis rolling back to do it. So you want to make sure you're high enough that you're going to move forward from here. And that could be your pose. If you are a little more flexible, a little more mobile, if you're up on a block, you're probably going to need something to support the backs of the knees for the same reason as before. I'm not on the floor, but I can start to slide my heels out and still maintain this direction of my pelvis. This is not for everybody. This is for those who are here and still maintaining this. You can play with it and see. You know, all levels means is I got to show lots of different versions, and you got to find what's going to be okay for you. So another option, come back up for a second. Number three is I'm going to take my strap. I'm showing you this sitting on the floor, but you could be up high on blocks. Support the backs of the knees if you think you're going to go towards straight legs. So same idea here. Now I've got an arm extender. So lift, and I'm not lifting just my chest. I'm lifting here, coming forward, maybe. And if I'm here, I'm going to pull my arms away from each other. Okay, so find some variation and see what it's giving you. Actively, if you're feeling like your heels are on the floor and it's painful, go sideways. Well, I guess you have to sit off the mat in order to do that. So I would probably go this. It feels like a lot to kind of set up, but it's worth it because you're honoring what your body is doing. Here we go. Here's the blanket and block debate again. So if I'm here, I'm just leaning my legs into the block. It might look like they're the same height, but it's not lifting me, keeping me lifted like the block is. So then it might be like this. And I'm allowing my low back to go into flexion. But you might be here. So you're play with this a little bit. What are you getting out of it? Because if you might find, you know what, I'm not really getting anything out of this. It just, everything hurts. I'm amazed though that in some yoga classes, seated forward bend and seated poses are put in like right at the beginning sometimes. Like these are not great poses. They require a lot of patience. So when you're ready, you can start to come up and come out. We can turn this into, unless you've come out of it, you can turn this into a rotation too. So from this lifted place, you can start to rotate to one direction. You can come forward. You know, there's a lot of options. And remember what I said about how you do your yoga, how you do your life. Like, look to see what are the similarities, what's happening here. Are you wanting to be somewhere you're not? Are you wanting to feel something different? Are you looking for a specific thing? Notice what you're feeling, where you're feeling it, and would it be, I don't want to say easier, but would you feel better? Would you feel like you're strengthening or you're releasing if you adjusted something that you were doing? So there you have it. That's lecture over. Okay.
So basically, you're after the fibers of the lower back.
It is a forward bend where you lengthen through the low back is definitely going to lengthen the muscles there along the spine. But there's also hamstrings. There's also, as I come forward, my tendency might be to just curl and really round through my upper back. So I'm strengthening. You can think of forward bend, seated forward bends in particular, as spinal extensor strengtheners. So in order to lift like this, I've got to contract the muscles of the back of my body, and that's hard if they're weak. I'm going to hold myself there as I go into the pose. Good questions today. Ready for Shavasana? Take your legs, bring them back, come back into table, maybe downward dog one more time. Move through your spine. Downward dog, you might be able to move your legs towards straight. You know, I'm not a big, you can do downward dog with a flexed spine if you want to straighten your legs because you want the feeling of straightening your legs. It's your choice. To sustain that might be challenging. But I'm going to say, hey, only you know if it feels good. Okay, when you're ready, you can settle into Shavasana. I'm taking you late and I apologize for that, but I just had to get that one in. If you have to go, I'm sorry about that. If you can lay for 30 seconds, lay for 30 seconds. I'd like to give you 4 or 5 minutes, if that's possible. And just notice what it feels like to lay out with your legs out or legs up the wall. Just see that relationship. If you're feeling like you've got tension in a specific part of your body, it was probably working really hard. And the question is, did it need to work that hard? Did that place in your body need to work that hard? Or is that what you always do? So notice as you're settling, notice what you're feeling. Take a breath in, exhale, maybe with a sigh. If there's anything your body needs, offer it what it needs, what you think it needs. And let your eyes sink back. Perhaps you can unhinge your jaw, move it around a little bit. Hear the sound of my voice. If you want to stay here longer, please feel free to do that, even the ones that are in the studio. And if you are moving, or ready to come up and sit, just wiggle a little bit, do whatever your body is asking of you. And then remember, it's important what you choose to sit on. Even though it might take an extra few moments to find a seat, not necessarily a comfortable seat. But yeah, we kind of want comfort when we're sitting. Like this is moving you towards a seat that you might have for meditation. And it doesn't matter how you sit, because we want to line up the three diaphragms of the body. One's in the pelvic floor, and when the pelvis rolls back, it's just not going to have this connection between the floor here and your throat. We want to have some ease to breathing, an ease that brings in the prana, that helps to distribute this life energy throughout the body. So it's not just because, I like to torture you. Although Brad's skeptical on that one. I have best of intentions for you all. Thanks for joining me. Peace.